Today, we're getting into a case that is just a total mindbender. It's got time, the law, and technology all tangled up in a really wild story. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. A journalist gets convicted for an article before the crime she was convicted of even existed. It just doesn't sound possible, right? Well, that's the bizarre reality at the heart of the case against Nobel Prize winner Maria Ressa and her news site Rappler. And the answer, believe it or not, comes down to a single, tiny typo that was corrected years later. So that's the big question we're tackling here. How on earth did one little spelling correction lead to a guilty verdict? All right, so let's start at the end of the story with the verdict, because this thing sent absolute shockwaves through the journalism community. So on June 15th, 2020, a court in Manila hands down a guilty verdict. The defendants, Maria Ressa, the executive editor of Rappler, and one of her journalists, Reynaldo Santos Jr. The charge was cyber libel, and it all started with a complaint from a businessman named Wilfredo Kang about an article on their website. And we're not talking about a small fine or a slap on the wrist here. No way. The sentence could mean up to 6 years in prison, on top of fines. The stakes were incredibly high from the get-go. So, you're probably wondering, what did this article even say to cause all this drama? To understand that, we have to rewind the clock all the way back to 2012. The article dropped on May 29th, 2012, and it made some really serious claims. It connected Wilfredo Kang, the businessman, to the top judge in the country at the time. But that's not all. It also alleged he was being investigated for human trafficking, drug smuggling, and was even linked to an unsolved murder. I mean, these are the kind of allegations that can destroy a reputation. Okay, now here is where things get really weird with the timeline. Remember, the article is out there, but the law they used to prosecute them for it didn't even exist yet. Let's just walk through this. The article gets published in May 2012. The Cybercrime Prevention Act, the law with the cyber libel crime in it, isn't signed until September, and it doesn't even officially start until October. Now, you don't have to be a lawyer to know you can't be charged with a crime that didn't exist when you did the thing, right? So, how did this happen? So this new law created this brand new crime, cyber libel. It's basically the old school crime of libel, but supercharged for the internet. It applies to anything committed through a computer system. And that, as the court saw it, makes it way more powerful and way more dangerous. This is where the prosecution pulls out its secret weapon, a legal argument that honestly feels like it's trying to bend the rules of time. So check out this new timeline. The law passes, but it gets put on hold by the courts for a while. Then, on February 18, 2014, the hold is lifted. The cyber libel law is officially fully in effect. And then, get this, the very next day, a staffer at Rappler goes into that old 2012 article and corrects a typo. And what was this huge case-defining edit? They changed the word evasion to evasion. That's it. One letter. A simple spelling mistake. But for the court, that tiny little fix was everything. Okay, so the entire prosecution case rested on this typo fix. Their argument was that by fixing that one word in 2014, Rappler had republished the whole article. And there's this legal idea called the doctrine of republication. The court bought it, saying that the 2014 edit was like hitting publish all over again. And this time, it happened after the cyber libel law was active. So, boom. The timeline problem is, in the court's eyes, solved. Now they just had to prove the article actually was cyber libel. And to do that, they used a 5-point checklist. And the court just went down the list. Number 1, was there a damaging claim? Oh yeah, the allegations were huge. 2, was it published? They said yes, thanks to that 2014 republication. 3, was the person identified? Yep, Kang was named. 5, was it done on a computer? Duh. But it's that 4th one, the existence of malice, where things get even more interesting. So the court said there was malice in 2 different flavors. First, there's malice in law. The judge decided Kang was a private person, not a public figure, which is huge, because if you're a private person, the law just assumes the article is malicious. The journalist had to prove it wasn't. But the court didn't stop there. They also found malice in fact, what you might call actual malice. They said Rappler showed reckless disregard for the truth because they didn't do enough to check their facts or to post Kang's side of the story.
Look, this verdict wasn't just about Maria Ressa or Reynaldo Santos. It set new rules of the game with huge, and I mean huge, implications for pretty much anyone who posts anything online in the Philippines.
One of the biggest bombshells had to do with how long someone has to sue you. For a normal newspaper article, you've got 1 year. But for cyber libel, the court said, nope, that clock now runs for 12 years. That's a massive difference. So how'd they get to 12 years? Well, the new cybercrime law forgot to mention a time limit. It was just not in there. So the court went looking and found a different, older law that says crimes with certain penalties get a 12-year window. And just like that, every online article now has this massive legal shadow hanging over it for more than a decade. And in the final verdict, the judge wrote something that really stuck. The keyboard is now mightier than the pen. She argued that because of the internet's power and speed, cyber libel is just a much bigger deal than regular print libel, which is why it needs tougher rules. Now, the court was very clear on one thing. They didn't see this as squashing free speech. They basically said, hey, freedom of the press isn't a free-for-all. They argue that journalists have to be held responsible for being accurate and fair. And to really drive the point home, the judge ended her ruling with a quote from Nelson Mandela. The idea was to frame this conviction not as taking away freedom, but as protecting one person's freedom, the freedom to have their reputation unharmed. And really, that's what this all boils down to, right? It leaves us with this huge question that's so relevant today. In this digital world where everything we write can live forever, where do you think the line is? How do we balance protecting someone's reputation with protecting our fundamental freedom to speak our minds?